okay. Now, before I get into the topic at hand, I want to talk about my shirt real quick, because not only is this month the 30th anniversary for the Super Nintendo, but also for Nicktoons. So, as I've mentioned in videos before, Super Nintendo, my favorite console of all time, and, I still watch a lot of Nicktoons over the years, so what I decided to do for the 30th anniversary for the Nicktoons was I took my favorite characters from each of the show, or favorite character from each show that I watched over the years, and put them all together in a collage and had it printed onto a shirt. But I just wanted to mention that real quick, since it's 2 and 2, so to speak, or 2 anniversaries this month, for 30 years. Yeah. Anyway, so like I did last week, since it's the 30th anniversary of the Super Nintendo, my favorite console of all time. Last week I went through my collection of games for the system. This week I'm going to do a countdown video of top 5 reasons why it's my favorite console of all time. So, let's get started. Number 5, instruction manuals. Now, this was something we continued to see up until probably about, I want to say, well, it's something we saw throughout the gaming industry throughout the years up until whenever, they slowly started to diminish over time, which is kind of a good thing, it saves a lot of paper, but still, it was kind of nice and cool, like when, there was just something about, like, I mean, obviously now you don't really need instruction manuals. I mean, like, some games just have, like, a digital instruction manual, others you can just, even just, well, new and old, you can just look it up on the internet, like, find out what everything is about and stuff, but there was just something about, like, with an instruction manual, looking up the controls and the characters and the story and things like that, and I feel like, well, there's a couple, the Super Nintendo, it was just, for one thing, they were pretty much always in color, probably not all of them, but a number of them were usually. Just some ones that I happen to have. Even like the third-party games, it was like in color and stuff, so to speak. But it was like, they were in color, the illustrations were really cool. Some of them even had comics, like I remember the F-Zero one did, one of the Double Dragon ones did, but, yeah. So that was kind of like just like a more minor thing, but... So, number 4, the controller. Now, personally, I think this is the best controller Nintendo's ever put out, GameCube being a close second. For one thing, it fits... It's like got this perfect grip to it that just fits in your hand perfectly. Like, and another thing, it's one of the least flawed, so to speak. Like, we'll talk about the others first. Like the NES, not really too bad. The NES was an okay controller, but for one thing, because of the limitation of buttons, it made it harder to play some of the arcade ports. Plus, the wore on your thumbs pretty bad. The N64, well, the analog stick was faulty, and you had like various ways to hold it, which was like not a bad thing, but it was, yeah. The GameCube I already mentioned, obviously, and SNES. The Wii and Wii U had gimmicky, like, I mean, because we're talking about the controller that came bundled with the system, so the Wii and Wii U had like gimmicky controllers, which really not a bad thing. I'm not against gimmicky controllers, but it's like those should be like sold separately. You're not bundled with the console and then have like most of the console's library revolve around those. Like, I mean, SNES had like other gimmicky controllers like the Super Scope and the mouse, but those were those were sold separately, and you had games made for that. The Super Nintendo came bundled with this too, actually, and then you had like most of the game's library focused around this, but yeah, like I said. Number 3, the graphics. Now, let me explain. See, there's something about the graphics on the Super Nintendo that they kind of just I mean, put the Super FX thing at chip aside. Like, we're talking about, like, that thing that was used for games like Star Fox and Doom. Obviously, they're, like, dated, now, but any other game, like, like Super Mario World, Peacekeepers, that we're listening to now, Final Fight, Final Fantasy 3, aka 2, Super Metroid, F-Zero, the list goes on, but my point is, these games, they just have, like, this graphics, it's like they almost have, like, this perfect balance to them, like, almost, like, the NES, like, I'm not knocking the graphics for the other consoles, like NES and N64, which I'll get to in a second, but the point is that it's, like, the NES was, like, the graphics were, like, all kind of very pixelated, like, it was all, like, these little sprites and everything like that. And then in the N64, because that was kind of like the early stages of 3D gaming, so again, a lot of stuff looked like very pixelated and stuff, because it was like it was 3D, but everything was like pixelated, whereas like Super Nintendo, it was like the NES, it was like a side-scrolling, type of thing, but it had like this balance to it, so to speak. Like it had like Super Nintendo games played mostly like NES, but the graphics looked like more enhanced, so to speak. So like that's why I think the Super Nintendo had like better graphics than both NES and N64. Like, not saying those consoles had bad graphics. I just think the Super Nintendos were more balanced. Like I'm saying, like NES and N64 were more pixelated. Number 2, the music. Super Nintendo had some of the best video game soundtracks of all time, like especially like the ones by games that are for Rare, like like there was Killer Instinct and the Donkey Kong Country games. Hell, even games by Interplay like Earthworm Jim, and those just like hell, even like some of the more like weaker games like Rise of the Robots, which is considered to be one of the worst games on the system. I think that game had pretty good music. Like, even if a game was bad, it still had pretty good music. Well, I mean, not all of them, but... And, it's just... I don't know, just like, overall, the system had amazing music. I don't think it's the best. Like, I think PS1 has the greatest music of all time, but Super Nintendo would definitely be a very close second. Like, there's just so many amazing soundtracks on that system. Like, I can't... yeah. So, move on down to the number 1 reason, and that's the games. And Super Nintendo definitely has, like, the greatest library of games in the history. Like, there's F-Zero, Super Mario World, like, we'll start with the first party, Donkey Kong Country, Super Metroid, Tetris Attack, which actually had a different name in Japan, Yoshi's Island, move on to third party, Earthworm Jim, Peacekeepers, or what was a favorite of mine, Metal Warriors, Sunset Riders, TMNT 4, Turtles in Time. The list goes on and on and on. Castlevania 4, Final Fantasy 3, aka 2, Final Fantasy 2, aka 3. Final Fantasy 3, aka 6, Final Fantasy 2, aka 4, Battletoads and Battlemaniacs, Battletoads Double Dragon. The list just goes on and on and on. There's so many games on the Super Nintendo that still hold up to this day. They're still fun to play, and especially like, and of course there are ones that like games that don't really hold up well, or they're just not good games. Like, they sucked then, they suck now. Like, a couple of examples. Well, yes and no. Well, one perfectly good example is a game called Street Combat, which it was it's a fighting game that I played it as a kid. Back in the early 90s. I played it again like 6-7 years ago. I can easily say that is the worst game I have ever played in my life. I mentioned that it's a fighting game, right? This game is so bad, it makes Shaq Fu look like a masterpiece. But that game is just absolutely awful. And then there are other games that you go back and play, and it's like, not really as good as I remembered. Like a game called Faceball 2000, where it's like, this is another game that's like, again, like where the graphics are like kind of dated. Like I think I mentioned it a minute before when I was talking about the graphics, but basically you play as like these shapes with faces, and you go through mazes and shoot balls at each other. Like the gameplay, it's very sluggish, like, and it's like the frame rate is just very, very low, and then it's just like the graphics is just really weird. It's the best way to describe it. It looks like the scene from Tron when they're on the motorcycles, and he's like, "I'm taking them into the maze." That's pretty much what the gameplay looks like, but much, much slower. But like I said, you know, and then obviously there's other games, like, where's that one, like, Balls? I think it's like a fighting game where, like, characters are all made of balls. I mentioned Rise of the Robots, and there are other, Terminator 2, the one that was made by LJN based off the movie, but, yeah. A lot of the Simpsons games and other stuff, but, like, you know, so, like, yeah, there's mediocre games on there, but there's plenty of other ones that are just amazing. Like, there's the well-known ones, and then there's the hidden gems as well. But so those are the reasons that the Super Nintendo is my favorite console of all time. So happy 30th anniversary to the Super Nintendo. Happy 30th anniversary to the Nicktoons. As always, thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll see you next time.